Mark chapter 3, beginning with the first verse, we read, "Again he entered the synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand. And they watched Jesus to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man with the withered hand, 'Come here.' And he said to them, 'Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill?' But they were silent. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him." It's true that the Ten Commandments that God gave Israel through Moses included the command to remember the Sabbath, that seventh day of the week, and to keep it holy as a day of rest. The people of Israel weren't to work that day. Yet the Pharisees and scribes and others like them, in their zeal to keep all of the details of the law that God had given, had allowed themselves to miss the point. They'd become so focused on what was work on the day of rest that they forgot what the rest was really all about, what resting with God was meant to accomplish. So when Jesus finds himself, as he so often was, in the synagogue on the Sabbath day, Jesus regularly went to church, as we might consider it for his day. When there was a man there who was hurting, they're watching Jesus, not because they expect to see something amazing, not because they expect to glorify God, which would have been so appropriate for the day of rest. No, they're watching him because if he heals that man, they want to accuse him of breaking the Sabbath. They believe that if Jesus were to restore that man's hand, he would be violating that command to rest that day. And that doesn't make any sense. If you truly understand who God is, if you truly appreciate why he teaches us what he teaches us as his people, then you'll realize that that sort of healing, that sort of restoration is exactly why God gave the Sabbath in the first place. But those religious authorities couldn't see that because their hearts were hard. And it made Jesus angry. Did you know that about Jesus? Sometimes Jesus was angry. He was grieved at the hardness of their hearts. We sometimes get this mental image of Jesus where he's just always warm and fuzzy, that he just always has a smile on his face, but that's not who Jesus is. There were things that ticked him off too. Yet appreciate that when Jesus got angry, he handled it so much differently than when you or I get angry. Because when Jesus was angry at their hardness of heart, what did he do? He healed a man. He reached out to a hurting person nearby, and he healed him. Contrast that with the Pharisees in this same passage. On this day of rest, this day of restoration, of settling in with God, when they're angry at Jesus's conduct, they went out and immediately, so it's still the Sabbath, held counsel with the Herodians on how to destroy him. In their sinful human anger, all they could do was exert effort at how to tear down, to get rid of, to destroy Jesus. Which of those is more in line with what God actually intended for the day of rest that he gifted to his people? This is the challenge that Jesus presents to us. When we see Jesus, we see somebody who did become angry, but as the sinless Son of God, he shows us how that anger is then funneled into doing things that are productive, that build up, that are just, unlike us, because when you or I get angry, we are much more likely to let that anger become something that hurts someone else, that tears down someone else. We're much more likely to exert so much energy agonizing over and obsessing over things, thinking about what we're going to say, maybe even plotting and planning what we're going to do in a way that's corrosive for ourselves and for those around us. But if we know who Jesus is, if we are seeking to follow him, then when we find ourselves in those situations that make us angry, knowing that Jesus himself experienced anger sometimes too, we need to accept the challenge to have our thinking be reframed, to not let those moments of anger become times where we lash out and hurt others, but instead to channel that energy into reaching out and helping someone for God's glory.